about. Okay.
That's not,
I think so.
okay, meeting is called to order. So tonight's agenda is, there were no applications on the agenda again tonight, so we have a number of administrative items picking up on where we left off last time, principally. I had sent around early last week a revised draft of the bylaws for your review, and so we can talk about that. I didn't. If you have specific language changes, we can talk about those tonight. I didn't get much in writing. Jackson and more things. I went back and looked at the video and tried to capture everything we talked about, but I may have missed something, and so we can talk about it and see if what I put in this redraft is acceptable to everybody. We also have the solar bond language that Henry sent around for review, and we'll take a look at that as well. And a couple of other updates on administrative items that we talked about a little bit last time as well. So why don't we start with the bylaws? And everyone got that. Yours opened up strangely, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just have two issues.
Okay. Maybe the best way to go through it would be just to start at the top and run through, and if there's anything that I should explain why I did what I did, I can do that, and then we can talk about any comments or suggestions that you have. Beginning with the purpose section, there had been some discussion about not stating that the purpose of the bylaws was to set forth the authority and responsibilities. That was a comment Peter made, I believe. So I played with that a little bit, and I changed it around so that it does not talk about setting forth the authority, but it does provide reference to the authority and responsibilities as they are set forth elsewhere. So that's the reason why I made that change. I don't know if that was, did that
Looked fine to me.
suit your need? Okay. Any other comments on that piece? In number 3, membership and appointments.
Question?
Yeah.
I should know the answer, but what was the board that pre-existed before the planning board? Because you're saying the planning board was established in 1989. What was before that?
I think there was a planning board, but I said it was reestablished in 89, and that was that document that we had looked at.
Mm-hmm.
There's an 89 document, and it was approved at town meeting. And one of the things that document did was to, it says, pursuant to, and there's a citation to the Maine Constitution, the town of Readfield hereby reestablishes the Readfield Planning Board. So I put it in there for that reason. This went to town meeting, and there was a reestablishment. I wanted to see what you thought about, again, in that first line, it says, as reestablished, a full board consists of, and I know that we had some conversation about some of this language, but as I was reading it, I was thinking that we should probably strike up to. So in this draft, it says a full board consists of up to 7 regular members and 3 alternates. And in thinking about it, it didn't make a lot of sense to me because a full board is in fact 7 full members and 3 alternates. The up to language, I think might be relevant when you're talking about a quorum, but a full board is in fact 7 plus 3. So.
Yeah, and the state statute actually, which I looked at finally, says a planning board must be either 5 or 7.
Okay,
Nothing in between, nothing less.
that's interesting.
Yeah. It doesn't tell, the state statute doesn't tell how many alternates you can have.
Is there flexibility on the alternate? It doesn't
Yeah.
say, so maybe it should be up to 3 alternate members then, instead of,
Well, except that this
it's saying a full board.
reestablishment document that was approved at
That's
town
it.
meeting says, shall consist of 7 members and 3 associate members.
yeah. And it also says full board, so that's if everything is staffed. So you might not have 3 members, so you just won't have a full board.
Right, right.
You can still operate.
You can still operate.
Yeah.
I think you're right, Paul. I think the comment is related to the quorum.
Yeah. Well, I got rid of up to in the quorum language as well, so there's no more up to here. Gone.
I love it.
It's up to you.
Does this require a warrant to change it, or is it? You can-
No. The way we were talking about this was that it was more internal to the planning board.
Okay.
It's more of a procedural document, and there aren't any external requirements. There's nothing that puts any mandate or requirements on anyone on the outside. And so it's not an ordinance, it's not a rule, and so it does not have to go to town meeting.
It seems odd that we could create our own rules without getting oversight by the select board.
Well, they will go to the select board
Okay.
ultimately. I've had a conversation with Eric, and the way we left it was that when we have something that we're satisfied with here, I will give it to him and let him take a look at it, and then he'll bring it to the select board.
Okay. And they'll vote on it?
I don't know what they'll do with it, but they'll have an opportunity to do whatever it is they need to do.
Paula, the line, a couple of lines further down, about initial appointments, I think is now an anachronism. Is that dealt with the 1989, same as the 1989, that's the language of the 1989
Yes.
enactment, but we have no need to stagger now. We have 5-year terms, but if we replace somebody else, we serve out the remainder of their term.
And we hadn't talked about that piece at the last meeting, and the only reason I put it in there was that I was reading that reestablishment document again, and it's in there very specifically, and I honestly don't know if that's the process that's being used in the town office. I mean, when people are appointed.
No, I think it meant that when they reestablished the board in 1989, they staggered those terms so people wouldn't all leave at once. But once you have the initial appointments, then each new appointment should be for 5 years, I think is what the intent was.
Okay.
I think that's true.
Do you think it is?
I do think so, and double check that.
Yeah, when I saw that term, initial appointments, I guess I was not really sure what that meant. And if it means pursuant to this reestablishment, then that would be true.
Most boards have like a cohorts. So you have 7 members. So you have it's called like 3 subgroups within that or something.
And
you'd stagger their terms. So,
and that's the way it is
right,
on this board.
and that's the way it should remain. So all board members would have different some, or at least 3 groups of board members.
But alternates are only 3 years.
Yeah, it says the term of office of an associate member is 3 years. So, Peter, you're suggesting getting rid of the 1, 2, and 3-year piece, which makes sense if that's what initial appointments means. But leave the
I've seen
5
it.
and 3.
I'm just thinking about the number of statutes when boards were created under state law. They would say, when we start the board is new, this is what's going to be 1, 2, 3-year terms. But from then on, the terms will be staggered because they'll be expiring at different
Yeah,
times.
okay, well,
That's
that
right.
makes sense.
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay, so in 3B, we had had the conversation about recusal and disqualification and how that related to this section talking about what quorum. And so this is a piece of that. What we had generally agreed to do was to merge 3B and I think it was 6B. And this is a result of that merger, this new language in B.
I think it's fine, but I have one little grammatical.
Okay?
I think in that line that's being added, recused, or I would insert the word is before the word disqualified. The reason I suggest that is right now, it could be someone reading it without the word is could think you're being recused for conflict of interest or being recused for, which of course people recuse themselves and for any number of reasons, which may not involve a conflict of interest or bias. If I'm say, hypothetically a friend of an applicant, I don't have a conflict of interest, the way the term's defined, but I don't want to recuse myself.
Okay. All right, I'll insert another is there. So for the, I just inserted solar ordinance there.
Do you, I have a question about 4A.
Oh, go ahead.
Is this workshop, I looked on the MMA website, I didn't find that this was scheduled because but is it, should we say, if they change the name of it, should we say that the members should attend a training by MMA or some other organization?
So describe it more generically, not the name of the workshop. Okay.
Yeah, you could say town approved workshop for planning. I remember doing that years ago, many years ago.
So in D, there had been some conversation about, I guess, the strength of the statement. And I made that a little fuzzier by saying that members are expected to regularly attend meetings rather than expected to attend all meetings.
I think that's an improvement. May I, in 4C, second line, I believe there's an extra 4C second line. There's an extra, there's a comma after the word board. I don't know why it's there.
Okay. And also in C, I changed affirms to confirms.
I think that's a good change.
And then in E and F, we had talked, I think, Jack, you had raised this issue of, what if these policies change at some point in the future, and so that language, and as may be revised from time to time, that we've used in the LUO in a couple of locations I inserted here also. And
I hate to talk so much, but I did a little comment about 4E.
okay.
Again, second line, I would feel better if it's after in connection with inserting the substance of matters before. So again, if you speak to someone at what time is the meeting, you're not engaging in an improper ex parte
Oh, which
communication.
one are you looking at?
4E, second
Oh,
line.
E, okay. Okay, in connection
With
with,
the substance of matters.
okay. I had inserted a footnote, and now I can't find where I had inserted it. It's disappeared.
Is there?
I think that it was, I think it was referring back to the definition of conflict of interest as it appears in the policy.
It says as defined in the town of Readfield conflict of interest.
Yeah, yeah, and, but what I can't find is the zipper script where I inserted that.
It's after communication in 4E.
4E.
First line.
Oh, there it is, okay.
See it?
Yeah, I see it now.
It's kind of faint.
It is faint. Okay. All right. Then 6A, Jack had suggested replacing the reference to the specific second and fourth Tuesdays of each month with something more general to ensure flexibility. So that's the reason for that change. And then 6B is the piece that there was agreement that this could be deleted because the reference to recusal and exclusion or disqualification was included in 3B. And so this was removed for that reason, and the or more is removed here as well. In C, we had some conversation about how the select board policy addresses both conflict of interest and bias. But there was some conversation that we had about the use of the term bias, and I removed it. I don't think it really changes the operation of this piece at all by taking the term out. The select board policy specifically references conflict of interest or bias, but that doesn't mean we need to do it here. And I think, Henry, you had made the point that, if there's going to be an issue like that, it will be around conflict of interest, not bias. And so I just removed it and made the reference strictly to conflict of interest.
Yeah, it doesn't preclude somebody from disqualifying himself or recusing himself. This is only in the circumstance. Agreed.
In E, roll call vote is changed to voice vote for Peter's suggestion. G has the "as may be revised from time to time" phrase in it. H There had been a suggestion that the language that was used earlier in the document referencing other town ordinances and policies and laws of the state of Maine be inserted here. So that is here as well as earlier in the document. And then I, or vice chair, if the chair did not participate in consideration of the application. And you had a comment, another
Yes.
comment about that.
I was trying to add that the chair could request the vice chair to write the decision,
Okay. So you're,
not just because the chair did not participate in consideration of the application, but just because.
okay. So your language was signed by the chair or vice chair at the request of, or if the chair did not participate. Is that right? Is everybody okay with that? So,
I had a question on it. It says that we can amend the bylaws by a vote by the board,
yes.
but it doesn't say anything about revisions. I
Well,
didn't see anything where it said it. And I know it's going to the select board, but
and an amendment and a revision, kind of using those terms interchangeably.
okay. So
Um,
technically, this doesn't have to go to the select board.
I don't think it has to go to the
Okay.
select board. You know, I can ask Eric about that, but when I spoke with him about it, he didn't suggest that there is, you know, a process by which it must be submitted to the select board and they must vote on it or anything like that. But I can talk to him about that.
I'm just calling it out.
Yeah. And that piece, not worded exactly this way, but I did find that piece in a number of other municipal planning board bylaws where they specifically stated that if it was something that, you know, didn't have requirements in it for external parties. So-
Can I just ask a question? I mean, procedurally, it is an interesting point that the board could just change the way the board operates.
That's what I was thinking.
Other boards, it makes sense, like I would agree with that if it was a, maybe not the appeals board, that's an example of one, maybe that's not. But, you know, these other boards, library, whatever it is, I mean, that. But this board has an unusual, I mean, we have state statute that we have to abide by, and there's other sort of components of the purpose of this board that go beyond the municipality of Readfield. So I sort of feel like that, I'm surprised that it doesn't have to be
But
connected.
But all those things, I mean, it's really clear in this document that this board has to operate in conformance with any other ordinance
Yeah,
or
I mean-
policy of the town of
That's
Readfield
true.
or the laws of the state of Maine. The LUO, I mean, that's where a lot of our stuff is. So this is only intended to work in, you know, in conjunction with all of those other things.
So if the board appointed itself more power and wasn't warranted, it could be challenged by all those other statutes and ordinances that are.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things out there that put constraints on the operation of this board.
You know, for example, if we put in our bylaws that the quorum was 3, that would be illegal.
Right.
It'd be violation of state law, so it could be challenged. But I think the intent of a bylaw is like, for a board, is that nothing in it is independently legally enforceable. It's either restating what the law is, or it involves internal matters that can't be enforced against the outside world. I think that's, if we
I
attempt.
suppose that's right. Yeah,
That's the intent.
I mean, it's just a guiding document for the structure of the board.
Yeah. You know, I'll have a conversation with Eric about that when I send this to him, but
I was just wondering if there, I mean, if there was an advantage just to having asking for it to be approved, like even if it's not required, just for transparency purposes.
approved by,
The select board, or
you know, they may choose to do that anyway,
Yeah.
I don't know.
just so there's like a check and balance on this, because this board does have some significant authority, and it's, you know, it can impact a lot.
I don't know, as I-
Feels
as
like
I-
We could grant ourselves preferred parking in the parking lot.
That's right.
You want to write in another paragraph?
At 6:30 at night, I don't think that's gonna be a problem.
I mean, when you look at what this thing does, and what it doesn't do, I mean, I don't really even see much opportunity to take more authority than where.
No, it's, I'm not suggesting it's wrong.
Yeah.
Is this like a question about checks and balances, I think? Just-
Yeah, it's just a curiosity. It's not, it's fine, but it isn't to me, it's curious.
So, other comments, things we didn't talk about? Jack, did you have other things, or was it just that one piece?
It was just that.
It was just that? Okay.
Nice job, Paul.
Yes, great.
Okay, well, I can make these additional changes that we just talked about and send it out to everyone for one more look. And then when we're good with it, I'll send it to Eric, and he will provide it to the select board at some point. I will have a conversation with him about that and see, if they have any kind of a process or what they're likely to do with it. Okay. Just a quick update on the housing legislation that we talked about. MOCA, that's what they call themselves these days, the Maine Office of Community Affairs, that's the A. They are the entity that's administering all of the, among other things, they're administering the housing legislation, and they're administering the grant program that the state has for municipalities. And so I had checked into the grant program, and I can't remember how much we talked about this last time, but the municipalities that have a council form of government, the larger cities and towns that have city councils and so forth, are responsible for implementing this by this coming July 26th. Smaller towns such as our own, with town meeting form of government, are required to implement until July of 27. And so MOCA made it clear that in terms of grants, they're going to prioritize the larger cities that need to get their ordinances revised sooner. And if there's money left over, they would provide it early to smaller towns. But they were taking grant applications starting last week, I think it was. And likely our grant application will be submitted, I think, in March. Chip and Angelica, you probably know better than I do at this point. I think that Eric is going to plug you into that. No? Okay.
We haven't really talked about it yet.
So I had a conversation with Eric, and he is going to, the grant request obviously has to come from the town manager. And so we talked about what we did last time for LD 2003, and he was going to pull that And I think that there probably is a fair bit of cut and paste that can be done for this grant application. So, and it wasn't very complicated, last time. They just gave us money and we spent it and then told them what we did with it. I think that telling them what we did with it was more complicated than actually getting the funding. But so Eric is going to do that and get that started. So hopefully this spring we'll have the grant funding and we'll be able to hire a consultant in similar fashion to what we did last time to help with the changes. And I think they're complicated enough and there are enough of them, so we're going to need that support. So that will be coming. And I also talked to Eric about the fact that we had agreed that we wanted to move ahead with some bond language for the solar ordinance, and he's supportive of that. And so I told him as soon as we go through our process here, hold the hearing, that I would provide that to him for inclusion in the list of warrant articles for the selectmen. So, with that, why don't we talk about your language, Henry?
Let's talk about it.
Oh, sound like you don't like it. Feisty words right out of the gate.
I did have one question, I was looking at this. In the first paragraph, 21, I guess it was. At the end of the first paragraph, you say, faithful completion of the project in accordance with the approved site plan. Should it be the approved application, including the site plan?
Sure. I mean, this was just a draft in order to, I mean, you can keep adding things that it has to be applicable, has to be incorporated into this thought process, but that doesn't, our language is probably application because that's kind of how we talk about it. Other towns don't use that, so totally fine to add that, obviously.
Thank you.
I think this well, you've all probably had a chance to read it. I guess I would just point out two things just to remind us, right? So the most important need, it feels like, is based upon these large and medium scale solar, ground mounted specifically solar. So kind of limiting it to where it really needs to be. We need coverage, right? Against larger development projects versus a blanket over all solar, which it's not. So it's very specific to this scale solar project. And then the thing that I wanted to really highlight, the language here is dealing with what the requirement is as a standard of approval for that type of solar project. But we need to discuss sort of the length of time and the procedure for release of the bond. So that's something the board, there's huge variation in that across the industry. So it's really, there's not really a right or wrong answer. It's more just if you have knowledge of other thought processes that it may align with, then that's fine. Otherwise, what's presented here is not unreasonable in any way. It's just there may be an opinion about length of time, and that is something that is completely within our control and the process to the bottom of
the timing that you're talking about is
right. So there's two timing aspects here. One you don't want to change, which is the security has to be in effect for the approval to occur.
Yeah.
So that's obviously
Yeah.
you want that. And then the second timing is the release of the bond, and also what do you do if you have to use a portion of the bond? How much time and notice do you give the applicant before the town has the authority to initiate or to access those funds?
So you're talking about the 60 days here.
The 60 days, right?
This is the construction bond, right?
Correct.
Yeah. I used to be a bonding agent, believe it or not.
Oh, then you know,
I thought
you're on the wrong side of the
it was upon completion of the project, and it had to be signed off on by all parties that it had met the satisfaction to the.
Right, and that's the way it's written.
Yeah.
But the 60 days is, okay, so let's say let's say a solar project goes in and they put the power line in the wrong place. That's happened twice. So if that happens and we give notice to the applicant and say, hey, your power line's in the wrong place, you need to move your power line back in accordance with the plan that was approved, as an example.
Yeah.
And they say, okay, but it takes them a year to do it, right? There's no, that hasn't happened yet, but I'm just saying there could be a delay in the time. So the idea is how long, this provides a little pressure onto the
Yeah,
developer.
what if we did something like, my thought was that, we could leave the 60 days, that's kind of the default, but then say, or an alternative time frame that's agreed to in writing by both the applicant and the town, something like that.
The example you gave could be avoided if there was a sign off on a project, that it was out there inspected, somebody confirmed that it met the requirements of the application and all of it. And then once it's signed off on, the bond is released.
Yeah, the bond has to be released by the planning board.
Okay.
So it has to come back to the board. The board has to agree to all the components, and the CEO too.
Yeah.
I would suggest somewhere in here you connect it to getting the certificate of use. That, if the certificate of use goes out, then your situation comes up. It's already been done. But I think from the situations we've worked with,
Look, it says the bond, just read the paragraph. The bond and the other financial securities shall remain in effect until the planning board determines, based on written confirmation from the code enforcement officer, that construction has been completed in conformance with the law. The bond shall not be released until such a determination is made and approved by the planning board. So it's very, very clear. So it can be whatever format, if you want it, you have to give us assurance that all the conditions.
and when does the 60-day clock start?
We're talking about if they don't conform to something.
Understood.
If you access the bond. So the clock starts from when we give them written notice.
Got it.
So you would give them notice that says, which you did in the last scenario. And you say, you have not done X, Y, Z, or you need to do X, Y, Z. And it's written right now where it gives the town a 60-day window from the time that letter is delivered to the time the town may draw upon the bond or portion.
So they get the certificate of use and then we have 60 days after that?
No, they're not going to get the certificate of use.
What if they do get it, like in our case, they did get it?
It should be a period of time after they get the certificate of use. The term, like 30, 69, 120, 180, 360 days, something like that.
But Henry, the way I
I think we're
read what you
missing
did
on
under your construct, they won't get a certificate of use if they haven't done what they're supposed to do.
Correct. They should not get a certificate of use until it's done. And if they don't do it, then we have the right to access the bond to bring them into compliance,
Yeah,
or a portion of the bond.
well, the bond is in effect until they get certificate of use.
Until it's signed off and done and they get their certificate.
Yeah, and then we could say, you need to keep the bond in place for 60 days after that in case something happens. We go back out there and.
Well, that's fine, but that could be on a case-by-case basis, because on a smaller project, it
Yeah.
doesn't matter. So I didn't want to write it so specific or restrictive. I don't disagree with you.
Yeah.
But it does say we could do that. It doesn't restrict it from that from happening. It's just a case-by-case basis.
Is the solar ordinance a standalone ordinance from the planning board?
It is completely separate.
Does the solar ordinance provide for a certificate of use of occupancy? And if it does, maybe it should.
Does it?
Well, the applicant has to pay the bond until they're released from the bond. And it'd be unreasonable for us to ask them to hold the bond indefinitely, right? So,
What you may want to consider, which we had in my prior position in Connecticut, is that a certain portion of the bond can be retained for things such as plantings, i.e. screening. So that would be an opening for extending it for certain purpose.
It references back to the.
How do we determine the amount of the bond?
It's written that.
Like the percentage?
That is a very, because that's a very subjective thing. And so again, it's written in a way where it allows the planning board establishes that number, but that number is discussed and presented by probably the applicant and the code enforcement officer, and if we had a consultant that we were using or they did, you would reach an agreement on that amount.
Just,
I mean, you're gonna know it, it's
Well,
a
I'm just
construction
thinking, like,
development project.
if they get to the end of the project and the power line's wrong, the fence is wrong, the trees are wrong, and we've only figured on $50,000 or whatever.
Oh, no, the bond will be like 2 million, 4 million or something.
That was
It'll be a big bond, these projects are huge.
Big ones.
On that point of the amount, I thought it might be useful to clarify the flexibility I think you intend to say, where it says shall be established by the Readfield Planning Board, to add with respect to each project. So it's clear we're not setting an amount for all projects, we're doing it for each project depending with input about. If you didn't put that in, could someone say, well, the amount is, whatever you established the first time is the amount that applies to all future projects, and that's not the intent.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I suppose I mean, it doesn't hurt to add it, but the ordinance is written where it's the standard of approval for each application / project. So, I mean, it doesn't hurt what you're saying. Don't disagree, just it's more clarifying.
Henry, on the 60 days, I keep reading this too. It says, if the applicant fails to complete or to correct violations within 60 days after written notice,
Yep.
then the town can draw on the financial security. And so that 60 days is a limit that is placed on the applicant. It says they have to complete, correct any violations within 60 days, or else the town can draw on this, on the...
It says the town may.
It may draw on the bond, but there's no time frame on the town. That 60 days is specific to the applicant who has not conformed to whatever.
Right.
And couldn't the town extend to 60 days?
Well, that was my comment earlier.
I don't think you'd want to. I think you'd want the clock to run out, and then it says it may draw, and then you're in a situation where the town has a little more leverage over the applicant in this particular case, which is the whole purpose of having the bond to begin with. So you don't need to
You also have flexibility about when you send out the written notice.
That's right, you want the town to have that flexibility, and for the reason you're saying is you want to be developer friendly too, so you want to give them enough opportunity, but it's in the circumstance where they're being difficult, you don't want to have a lot of time frames in this thing, you want the town to maintain control over the process. Doesn't mean the town has to do it, has to draw the bond. It just gives the town the ability to do that if things become contentious.
Now, I was just anticipating a situation where somebody would say, oh, we didn't do it, we're gonna fix it, it's gonna take us, 70 days, or 90 days.
Well, the way it's written allows us to grant that flexibility. It doesn't require the town to take action after 60 days, it's just a clock that says we won't do anything until the 60 days is passed.
Yeah.
Chip, do you know how we signed off on the bonds for the projects we have had?
We've never had bonds.
It's never happened.
It's never happened, isn't it?
That's why we're doing
I
this.
thought they were replaced, we were revising them.
No, which is the reason why we're doing
I would assume that the applicant would go to the bonding company after he got the certificate of use and saying, I'm done, release the bond. And there's probably language in the bond that says, you have to produce something in order for us to release the bond.
Yeah, that's right.
Because they want to release that bond as quickly as possible because it's paying a fee for that.
Yeah.
So any language we put in here would require them to maintain that bond on the certificate of use. And we're saying that we could draw 60 days after, but that bond might not
No.
even be in place.
No, they're not going to get their certificate of use until it's approved.
Okay.
So this is all
So
pre.
that's the 60 days, okay.
It's all pre. The 60 days only has to do with violation. Like if they do something wrong, which they're not going to. if they have this clause, they're going to basically pay much more. The whole purpose of this is that they pay more attention to what's actually approved in theory.
Yeah, if they do everything right, they get.
Issues the certificate of use. It turns out that there are things that happen.
But we don't want, it allows us to have it, because it says, I thought about that, because it specifically says, if you read that second to last paragraph, it shall remain in effect, to your point, until the planning board determines, based on written confirmation from the CEO, that construction has been completed in conformance with all plans and conditions of approval, and that will not be released until such determination is made and approved by the planning board. So the bonding agency or applicant is not going to be able to get that bond released until the planning board gives them approval to do so. Now, we could tie it to the end of the project in some way, but I think that's, I mean, nothing's implied in this world of these things, right? So I suppose it wouldn't be a bad idea to put a time frame in there for that, or like you were saying, upon issuance of this approval. I don't know.
So if they go and get a bond, we would need to review it to make sure.
We would. This is a standard of approval, so yes, we will not approve their application until we have a bond.
Would it strengthen it to say the bond shall not be released until such determination is made, is approved by the planning board, and a certificate of use has been issued?
That's the end game when everything's done.
Right, but the I'd have to just think about that. I think if the bond, if the certificate of use is given, that does not override the approval of the planning board.
No,
In
no,
this circumstance.
no, and I don't think.
So I don't
think it
think
should, but.
we should tie that to, there's other reasons why a certificate of use may need to be granted in a certain time frame.
But isn't it true that we don't want the bond released until all of those things has happened?
Correct, but the certificate of use is not that moment in time. Sorry, maybe I'm missing.
The stipulations of the bond release are gonna have to be written into some sort of document that the applicant would give to the bonding company, so the bonding company would know when not to release that bond.
Correct.
I think the
It's very
default-
clear. It
Yeah.
says, when the CEO, when the town gives them a letter that says they've completed everything in conformance with the approved plans and
So
conditions.
is there a contract or a statement of work that the town, is there a contract that goes between the town and the applicant? Or maybe it's in the application itself. But they're gonna have to take a contract or something to the bonding agent, says, I need a bond for this. And the bonding company's gonna read all that they're agreeing to, because they're giving surety that the project is gonna be completed the way that is stipulated in that contract.
Yeah, but that's the approval of the application.
But that's the problem, they have to have a document. The application, I don't know if there's an application or a contract or something like that, but the bonding company has to read that. It says, okay, we guarantee if these guys don't do it, we
Sure.
will do it.
Well, this happens all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that
It's
would
very
be,
common.
that would
I don't
be
disagree.
the,
But what's that document?
that would be the notice of decision that's issued
Okay.
as a result of the planning board's approval
You
of
can
the
get they can get a
project.
draft, I mean, we do this with other things, they can get a draft and they can get a, it's not super uncommon for projects to be bonded within this.
Right, but in that that statement of decision, is gonna have to be stipulated the terms of the bond release.
Yeah, it does.
And this will be in the rule, and they're subject to the rule.
It does.
But that would be written into the document itself, like
Yeah.
that the ordinance, just,
They can just copy
I
it.
guess in accordance with the ordinance, if it's 69, 120.
I think there's a million ways to tweak this, so you're right.
Yeah.
I disagree with you. But I don't think, I looked at a lot of different ordinances, and this was pretty standard language that's used in several towns. And it hasn't been challenged, so I mean, mean, there hasn't been a lot of changes to it, so I would say it's probably pretty safe. I could see a situation though, I mean, we could always come up with situations in any of these scenarios where there may need to be improvement on that language at some point in the future. But I think the most important thing here is that we establish the concept of a construction bond for these projects. And so we should try to get it as best we can, but we're not going to get it perfect.
And I would think that we'd want to hold on to that bond for a period of time after, even after the certificate of use, because if something should happen, you know, within 60 days,
Okay.
you want to have the ability to go back and say, look, you need to go, something happened, you need to go back and correct this, something collapsed, or something terrible.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Like, and if you want some sort of guarantees that this thing's gonna not fall down for 60 days.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting concept. I suppose that they need it functioning and operating correctly in order to make money in this particular development type.
Yeah.
So they may be motivated to not let that happen, unlike in a cheap apartment building or something.
Paula?
John?
I know that once these solar farms are built, they're pretty static. But in regard to what Henry and Dana were just saying, do we need to think about any kind of a performance bond situation where once it's built and once the bond is released, what if everything kind of falls apart at that point?
I think.
I mean,
my
this
experience-
may be a separate subject, but
It's an interesting concept. We do have performance bond language in our ordinance in other contexts. However, in this case, the state of Maine also has they have quite a lot of regulation around solar, and was changing all the time. I think it's stabilized a little bit now. But they do have a lot of criteria that the applicant has to follow, and so does the utility company. So those two other entities, which that's unusual in the sense of its performance. So, and just to address it, because nobody said it, but just remember that the state also has requirements for decommissioning costs to be assured and planned and everything like that. So that's a separate thing as well. So there's a lot of sort of like guarantees that these developers have to provide, including to the utility company. You know, they have to have a contract with an offtake agreement with the utility companies, which they have to maintain a certain performance and criteria in order to even maintain that relationship. So my point is, I think, John, from a performance perspective, unlike other projects, this one has implied performance because of these other regulations.
And I don't know,
Beyond Readfield.
in thinking about it, maybe you can think of an example, but nothing immediately springs to my mind when I think about, some theoretical situation where there's a solar project. I mean, it's built, it gets its certificate of occupancy, and it starts to operate. What could happen? How would it theoretically fall apart? I can't think of a way in which that would happen.
Neglect. That sort of just walk away from it. But the ordinance. But the ordinance in our town addresses that very specifically. So if something's abandoned, essentially, for 12 months, then it triggers the decommissioning process.
I mean, with a lot of other types of projects, there's an operational component to them where there are opportunities for things to fall apart.
Right.
But I don't see that here.
In the performance perspective, and also a little bit what we were just talking about before, if the project is sort of non-functioning and just kind of a disaster, and 12 months went by from the time they started the project, the town would have the ability with the state to initiate a decommissioning process of the project. So there are other mechanisms, like I'm saying, beyond that are protective and helpful to the town. This has never happened to my knowledge, of course, none of this.
So Henry, the language that's in here, I was going back to looking at the decommissioning section 6.
Yep.
Is that language pretty much taken from the state law?
Yeah, we wrote it before the state, and then it's not conflicting at all. We decided to leave it in. So it's like, in addition, it's like in parallel with the state.
Okay, because I mean, there is that paragraph about requiring a bond there. And I just wonder.
Yeah, the state of Maine requires a bond in order to get the certificate from the state to do this.
So you don't think that there's any reason to include a linkage to the certificate of occupancy here with regard to the bond?
Well, we could add it, I just wouldn't.
Use, not occupancy.
Use, yeah.
You just don't want that to be a trigger, because I don't know about our experience, Chip's experiences, but looking at other communities, because of the way the utility industry works, there are circumstances where a certificate of use may be issued before the entire thing is 100% done, right?
That would be a conditional certificate of use.
Okay.
And a bonding agency couldn't take a conditional on
Okay.
before.
Okay.
Same works with houses and everything. I would say when the
But
builder,
that's-
whoever puts this together requests a certificate of use, that's what should be the trigger there, because they're saying we're finished, we think we should get a certificate of use. I think that's the trigger point where this kicks in, the 60 days or whatever.
Well, no,
I think it's a good idea if the applicant says, hey, we're ready for the certificate of use, we've complied with everything, and then you, or whoever the CO is, goes and confirms that.
Yeah.
Then that comes to the planning board again. And the planning board has to agree and approve that it's done.
so it's
Which
all
may
of
require-
those things, right? So I'm looking at that last sentence in the first paragraph. The bond shall not be released until such determination is made and approved by the planning board.
Right.
And it seems like it also should not be released until the certificate of use is issued.
Yeah, we could add.
So it's one more thing. It's all of those things would have to happen.
Yeah, I mean,
That's
Don't
kind of
disagree,
putting the cart
but
before the horse then.
I guess I was
Certificate of
just-
use shouldn't be issued until the bond's been released.
Well, if they built one,
Right.
in theory, they could be done in January.
In theory, yeah.
Right, but then we decide, well, they didn't plant enough trees. We
Right.
can't plant trees in January.
yeah, you're gonna wait.
So you could, you
That's a good
could get your certificate of use to be online. Instead of having to let it sit idle until June to plant your trees.
It's
So
good.
we hang on to the money.
That's a condition on the use.
We can release part of it.
Right, but if we gave them all their money in January,
Mhm.
then they don't
By the
plant
time
trees.
it's been done in
See what I mean? But they get the permit, but they don't really
June.
have full.
I think it's a very specific thing, I don't disagree with it, it makes sense, but you don't, the certificate of use does not preclude the need to have planning board approval as well to release the bond. Those things have to be tied together. And so right now, it doesn't, it's more generic than that on purpose, so you could interpret
I
it
just think
different
we
ways.
need to make sure that we're 100% happy before we let them have all their money.
Right, but it says not be released until such determination is made or approved by the planning board. The planning board can sit here and ask those questions, and if the planning board isn't satisfied with it, they can just say, we're not satisfied.
Yeah, and it's, it provides at least 2 bites at this apple
Right.
now,
Just to make it very clear, there seems to be some confusion with the 60-day thing, and I apologize, I didn't mean to make it confusing. That is only applicable if there's a violation of the applicant's construction. So this is, of course, the stick. If the applicant doesn't do something in accordance with the application, Chip will write them a letter and say, hey, you need to fix this. They have 60 days to fix it. if they don't fix it within 60 days, the town has the option, it's not required, has the option then to access a portion of that bonded fund in order to fix the problem.
Or the town could have a conversation with them and figure out what they're gonna do and come up with an alternative timeframe and not,
And that's
not
unsaid
draw.
because you don't want to specify that, but yes, the
Yeah.
town could come, it just says may on
Yeah.
purpose, right? But
Yeah.
it gives the town the leverage to basically, and you don't want that time frame to be much longer. You could go like a little longer, but 30 days is too soon for these things. 60 days seems reasonable. And if you're, it just allows things to continue to progress in the right direction. And I would say even the issues that we've had have probably progressed enough in that time frame anyway. So I don't think it's unreasonable.
I mean, the ultimate is for them to get the certificate of use so they can go online.
Right, they're gonna want to do it.
You know, no matter what, how big our bond is, their liability is even higher being held
To
back.
Dana's point, they're gonna do this as fast as they can, so they.
Yeah, they won't have to vote.
So this will encourage them to speed up the process, which is a good thing.
Will the bonding company release or provide access to the town for the town says the applicant can do this and it's gonna cost us $20,000? We want
I mean,
$20,000.
most likely the bonding company's gonna call the town and say, we did release this bond. That's what they typically do, so, because they don't want to end up being a whole person.
But if we want access, the town wants the money.
Yeah, there's stipulation in that, but the way it works with the bond, what you were going to do.
You file a claim against the bond.
Yeah, we filed a thing that says you're gonna access this, we have a quote for this, and it's $20,000, and they have $1 million bond hypothetically. Then the bonding company would review that, and then obviously, if we're doing it, they would probably release it, because it's a municipal situation.
The first thing the bonding company does is call the applicant and forces them to do it.
Right.
And then if they don't do it, they step in and hire someone else to do it.
It's the stick. So it gets done.
If you want a real world example, they were doing the big dig down in Boston, there was a company called Modern Continental that was doing all the digging, tunneling underneath the thing. And they just kept getting contract after contract after contract. And the bonding company wants to make sure that they've got enough funds to actually have enough working capital to do the work that they said they were gonna do. And everyone just thought it was crooked. Like, how could these guys keep getting more work? Why is the bonding company still standing behind these guys? And then the bonding company ended up stepping in and taking over most of the big dig and paying for the insurance company paid for that.
I think we're dealing with, the concept of this addition is to create a little more assurance for the town that these projects get completed in accordance with the plan.
Well, it also, the bonding company underwrites the applicant to ensure that they have the funds to complete the project. So there's financial protection and performance protection for both.
And we've learned our lesson because what we realized is, which is not uncommon, is they get the approvals and then a different group of people, sometimes even multiple different companies who were not involved in that approval process are the ones that are hired to execute, and they don't follow the plans in accordance with the approvals.
Right.
And there's a lot of plans, right? There's plans from the state, there's plans from the utility.
Or they become ghosts.
So it encourages them and gives them a little more incentive to do the right thing in accordance with what we expect as a community. Okay. What would you like me to do? Would you like to email me any minor edits, or how would we like to? Or maybe there aren't any.
I just wanted that application.
Oh yeah, the first.
Yeah, with, and then there was inserting the piece about the amount of financial security shall be established by the board. Was it Peter? You
With
had
respect to
suggested,
each
with respect to
project.
each
I thought about each application, but no, I don't think, I think project would be the better word there if we're going to use, if we're ever going to do that at all.
And you said, Henry, it functions okay the way it is, but it won't harm anything to insert that, correct?
I don't think it does, no.
So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, the fifth line down.
Yeah, okay, so I'll make those edits and then I'll send it back out. Do you want to, so, I don't know what the next one is.
Well, why don't you do that, and we can take one more look at it, everybody can think about it in light of this discussion for, the next couple of weeks, and at the next meeting, we can take another look at it and decide if we want to vote to send it to public hearing, which I assume we will. But that would be the next step, and then we would do a hearing as soon as possible after that.
Is that timing okay?
Yeah, that'll be okay. That'll be in February, and that's fine for select board time.
Okay. Good, thank you for entertaining this piece as we discussed.
Oh, thank you.
That was easy.
Easier than writing the whole word.
Yes.
Yeah, Henry, you did a good job.
Yeah, thank you.
We should do that. That's like a team of arms.
So there were a few other things that we had talked about at the last meeting that I just wanted to go over tonight. One thing that we had discussed was that there had been conversation about doing a number of different procedural documents covering different aspects of the land use process and so forth. And generally, I think we had agreed, and Henry, you had made this point, I know, and I think others had agreed with you that we would be likely better off focusing on the ordinance itself and including language to make it clearer, more complete in the ordinance rather than doing standalone procedural documents. The less is more concept. So I think there had been some general agreement on that. We had talked very briefly about doing an FAQ sheet having to do with land use permitting. And I had circulated a bunch of, it was kind of a brainstorming thing for me, a list of questions that might be included in such a document. They don't all necessarily have to be in there, and perhaps not in that order, but that was more of a starting point than anything. So that's a piece I think that we can, try to move forward to develop. And then the other thing that we had talked about in Dana's absence was maybe trying to get Dana to do an information sheet. We had talked at some point about doing different information pieces on, things like subdivisions or daycare facilities, and the one that came up at the last meeting in particular, and I think there's some agreement around it, is that we're seeing an awful lot of non-conforming structures in the shoreline zone, and that might be a good one to kind of run as a
I think that would
prototype.
Would that be the first one? Those are the most controversial, aren't they?
Yeah. And there are a lot of them, and they're complicated, I mean, as you know.
Well, and I think there's a lot of people on the lake who might consider doing renovations, but they're terrified
Yeah.
of what they might be getting into. And if they just knew, they might do it.
So we were kind of hoping that, you'd use your AI skills and maybe take the first crack at one of those.
Yeah.
If that's something you could do.
Yeah. I'll communicate with you a little bit to kind of narrow the scope down on,
Sure.
okay, and then just
Yeah.
use your expertise and guidance, and I'll take a crack at it.
Okay.
Wasn't that also the same for the procedurals, things you wrote up for the FAQ on procedure, that it could be a AI-generated document on what the process is?
Well, I suppose it could be. When I came up with the question, I wasn't thinking about it in those terms. I suppose that it could be. But,
Be one that just explains the process so somebody can go to our website and what I need to do to get a permit to do X, Y, or Z. And then it's a general thing about how we
yeah, there were some on there, though, that the answers, I don't think would show up in the, yeah, here it is. Oh, boy, some of them maybe, maybe could be responded to using AI, but something like, how long does it take to get a land use permit? That's not something that you can pull out of the ordinance necessarily. What is the purpose of the planning board's review of land use applications? I mean, maybe there's something that could be extracted from the ordinance around that, but, I mean, we could, try it that way.
I would encourage us to, maybe with your information sheet too, which I'm sure you're going to do, I would encourage us to write like the FAQ and like these information sheets in more of like, more of a community-friendly language rather than sort of more policy document language. I would definitely not go copy and paste things out of the land use ordinance.
I mean, it would be like, I'm thinking of building a house, what do I need to know?
Right. It's more like a user, and you can even have a disclosure on it if you had to, right? But the idea is that it provides some narrative to the bullet points or whatever it's going to be.
Yeah.
Right.
And the frequently asked questions, like, that's not a question that people think of when they think of. Like, that's not a frequently asked question.
Which?
What's the purpose of?
No, it isn't, and that's one that probably can get,
So, I mean, I think we should think
could
about
get
like,
dropped.
what questions people usually ask if you're trying to do an application, from the public's perspective, if you're trying to get something.
I just think, like, I'm thinking of remodeling my lakefront property. What do I need to know? Well, if you're 100 feet back, you're good.
Right.
Talk to Chip. If it's not, then you can expect to go in front of the planning board a couple of times. At least two, right? Maybe three.
Or, how do I find out if I'm allowed to do something where my house is, where my other property is located or something?
Yeah, I mean, you might have to.
Now, one of the questions, how do I know if I need a permit from the code enforcement?
Right. So that's a good question. People ask that all the time. So we can provide a little sort of guidance. Maybe not the answer they're looking for, but we can provide guidance.
So, I mean, it feels to me, given this conversation, that, that you're advocating more for, a real person writing responses to these, rather than doing an AI-generated thing, which will be coming from the ordinance. I mean, that's all it can do.
It'll have the feel of a real person doing it. Like, we just do it until it sounds natural.
Yeah.
No, I think AI could do it. I just think we may have to tweak it at the end.
I think there are some that will be more problematic than others in terms of, we can tweak them. So.
My only caution would be just to have a little disclosure on it somewhere that, something like that.
No, I think we need a disclaimer.
Sorry.
I don't think people really know about the zoning maps inside of it. Did you know that Readfield has zoning maps and there's certain zones? I mean, you don't know these things until you...
People don't know it. I mean, we know.
No, we know it because you go up against it, but until you have to know it.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
And it certainly is, it's one of the big issues with shoreline zoning stuff.
Yeah, everything's a surprise when you go through it for the first time.
The document have links to...
Yeah, you can do links, but you don't know that.
I think it would be super helpful to have it to the community.
Tap one?
Just these things would be super helpful. I think it would alleviate a lot of sort of the, when people don't understand something, they can view boards like this as not uncommon, right, as sort of a tension point, or like a barrier to their success, but they have to respect the fact that we're not.
Well, and see, like,
This will help with that.
someone who's inexperienced is doing discovery at the board meeting, unless they go and hire a lawyer.
It's very complicated.
Yeah.
And so
And
this will give you that.
you don't want to go out there and have hired a contractor to come and find out that you can't do what you wanted to do. It's expensive. It's an expensive learning process for somebody that wants to go through it.
And so it's probably important, you know, right in the beginning of one or more of these documents to say, when you start thinking about doing your project on the lake, you need to come in and talk about it.
Here's a couple things, 25 feet, 50 feet, 75 feet, 100 feet.
I mean, how many times have we seen, I mean, like that, was it a year or two ago, there was the applicant who, well, it was like an after the fact applicant, they moved a shed or something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Completely like nobody, like it wasn't like a big deal, right? But because it was in, I believe,
It was a big
shoreland
deal.
zone.
It was a big deal because he had asked if he could do it and. they-
Okay, well, that's better. But my point
The answer
is,
was
sometimes
no.
people think, to your point, they think they can, oh, it's just a shed, I can just tweak it over there. And like,
Yeah.
it seems like very logical for people to do, but they don't realize. Unfortunately, ignorance is not a defense.
So maybe we could start with the shoreline zoning
Yeah.
one, and I can take another look at this list of questions and maybe pare it down a bit and put them in some order. And then,
You could also ask AI, how did you get those questions? Did you just,
how did I get them?
Yeah.
They came out of my head.
so you could ask AI for lists of commonly asked questions. You could figure out the prompts, and it would give you a list of, it'll scour all the FAQs and planning boards in the state of Maine. It will come up with a list of potential questions.
I think shorefront's confusing too, because every town does a little bit different. Then, most people have heard of the 30% rule. When they come in and they assume that Readfield's following the 30% rule, and then they're like, oh, is it square footage or is it living space, or all these conversations that we had last fall. We're talking about how you determine what's reasonable. I'll take a stab.
Thanks, Dana. Angelica also distributed that draft flow chart. And I'm not entirely certain the ways in which it would be helpful, but I keep thinking it could be, in some way.
Probably if it was simplified.
You know, I wouldn't want somebody to come through the door and we hand them the flow chart. I mean, that,
Right.
that
Some
would be.
people like flowcharts.
I love flow charts.
Yeah, a lot of people love them. I looked at it, I thought actually it was,
Thank you. It's the
thought it
first
was-
flow chart I ever made.
but I like the concept of it.
I think
Yeah.
for, like, you want to open a daycare, I think it would work well, but shoreland is just so big.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you wanted to,
So maybe we should take a look at it and refine it and then figure out, the ways in which it might be useful or who we want to give it to and who we don't. And, it could be available. There are people who might find it useful and people who might not. When I looked at it the first time, I had a few comments on it, and, which I don't have with me, but maybe if everybody could take a look at it and we can refine it a bit at an upcoming meeting, and then we'll have that piece as well.
And how well do you think people understand the big picture process, which you often go over whenever we have an significant applicant, or really any applicant? In other words, the first step is usually to talk to Chip, pay your fee, get your review. Then there's this sort of completion review, discussion, that kind of stuff. And then public hearing, KB 1, 2, can take some time. High level sort of process. Like, that could be an interesting flow chart. people would like that, right? They can see visually.
I think most people come in before don't really know how it all works.
I don't think they realize there are like 3 or 4 steps.
Right.
And it takes like a little while to go through these steps. And I think that's a surprise to people. Some people.
So the flow chart that we have, the draft of, is quite all-inclusive. And it's the entire process, which is a good thing, and that serves a purpose. But what you're talking about, it serves a different purpose. I mean,
Simplification.
the daycare person walks through the door and
Yeah,
has
but that's-
never been.
But that's what you really want. You don't need it for the consultant or their lawyer and their developer,
Right.
like kind of getting it. But you need it for that, the daycare person, the guy, the repair shop or whatever. They just don't know the process. To me, that's like the helpful thing. It doesn't even have to be that detailed, it's just more.
And so, I mean,
It's a
maybe-
kinder, gentler board model.
and maybe it takes the form of a package for applicants who might be, first-time applicants. And it could be a simplified flow chart and a list of FAQs.
That's a good idea. Yeah, that's a good idea.
And maybe like preferences, which could be tied into FAQs. I think that's a big part of it, is helping people find their resources.
Yeah, that's a good point too. Where do I go to define this?
Like GIS, for
Just
instance,
Google.
we have GIS on our website, and they can literally go on there and they can mark, like, for shoreland, they can mark the closest point of the building to the water and do an actual measurement right there on the GIS and print it out and everything from that.
Is that pretty accurate?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. As far as I've been told.
What was that? I missed that.
The GIS, like plotting the distance to the lake on GIS.
Yeah, but the caveat is that the maps are overlays, so it confuses everything. I'm using GIS with like a Google map, but it doesn't have the boundaries. So, I mean, the survey is far superior to
Yeah.
anything else.
Yeah.
It's a good starting point, though.
It is.
And one other thing that we've talked about a couple of times, and I don't know that there has been any kind of progress on this, because it's a pretty complicated and resource-intensive thing, but we had talked about possibility at some point of putting applications, being able to access those electronically. And I know that it's a lot for town office staff, and I think we had kind of set that aside for that reason. But I did want to ask about the possibility of maybe at least putting notices of decision up on the website. Is that something that's doable? You can think
I
about
don't
it.
think so. I mean, even if we just link it back maybe to the meeting, everything's kind of organized by meeting.
By meeting.
Yeah. But I mean, we could add it in. I can always add stuff. They would just have to know that that's where they would find it at.
Yeah.
We do have all the materials for the meetings and things on the website.
Yeah.
It's just, they're not organized.
They're relatively organized. They're definitely getting better. I mean,
Yeah,
but yeah, it's very much like,
but like we can't search them or easily.
Right, I mean, you
Right.
can't pull everything from one application in one place. You have to go back to the
Yeah.
meetings where it was
I'm
considered.
sure
Yeah.
there must be software out there to automate the whole process and then keep a record of decisions and all that stuff. I know it's big city stuff. But can we direct the select board to investigate the possibility of doing it or request that they do it? Because nothing happens until it's a budget item and it gets voted on by the warrant and they allocate dollars to that. But we should get the town in the 21st century.
I mean, there have been a number of conversations. I know, Eric has been part of those conversations, and Angelica, you have been. I think everybody is agreeing that it would be a good thing, but it's expensive and time intensive, and I think that's the.
But nothing happens until somebody puts a proposal forward, and someone either votes a yes or a no on it. And then it gets to a warrant, and then the town gets to decide whether or not we want to spend the money on it or not Eric. And I do think that should be automated. And one of the biggest complaints, and I've been through this myself, is what were the previous decisions rendered regarding what it is that I'm thinking about doing? I should be able to see that fairly quickly without having to come and poke through filing cabinets of inconsistent information, incomplete. So, I mean, do we think it's worth pushing it for the next, a solution to be in place for the next 50 to 100 years?
And part of the issue is that most of what we have right now is on paper.
Yeah, it's antiquated.
Well, it doesn't have to be retroactive.
No,
It could
it could be just going forward.
Yeah,
Yeah.
We could just get a structure and then start using it.
But we should push the issue, like, hey, select board, at least go out there and investigate this and figure out what it costs, and then bring it to the voters, and let them decide whether or not they want to allocate funds on the warrant. And if they don't, then don't do it.
I would think at the least, what we should have is a docketing system for applications. Because again, as I understand the system now, it's all geared to meetings. And things happen at meetings, but there's no continuity. So that, like say, the first application we received this year would be 26-01. And we could follow it along. Every subsequent filing should have that docket number, so at least we'd have a way of figuring out.
there is a numbering system.
Haven't you started that already?
Yes.
Yeah, you have that.
There
Yes.
is,
That's the agenda item law that we've been working on.
But it's still fairly manual, right?
And then, I'm sorry.
You have to keep track of it, right?
I do,
Yeah.
yes, but, I mean, that is something I feel like if we wanted to, we could put on the code enforcement page. It would just be consistently updated by Chip and I, so that when we get new applications, that would be obviously added as the agenda item numbers. We haven't put like the procedural stuff with numbers, but applications are. We've been doing it for a little over a year, I think now, so I could actually, if you were like, well, what happened with the FISC application, I could go back and look really quickly and say, okay, that's this agenda item number, and then I can find like the date and something like that. I mean, it's a quick snapshot of where you need to go to find more information. So, I don't know. I wouldn't have a problem
You can't
posting
get
that and
to, you
updating
can't
it
get to the
regularly.
minutes that way, right?
I'm sorry.
You can't get to the minutes that way.
You could, I mean, you could look at the agenda item log, find out when the date of the meeting was, then you have to go to that date to find those, the approved minutes or the agenda
Yeah.
or whatever.
Some towns have like just their meeting minutes in separate, so people can see, and the video recordings or whatever that are attached to it. And then they have files by applicant.
Yeah, we are shopping right now for a new website vendor. But I don't know what that's gonna look like yet.
So we just get this one.
We're a little bit, yeah, we're shopping.
We just need to get an IT person on board.
There is Jared Shaw, right?
Some whippersnapper.
He's on this level, right? Jared?
He's at a select board, but he's very IT, smart. Check him, see if he can,
What?
I mean, I could check with him and see if he has any idea of how to add that and add it by application rather than, or,
You have a docket number associated with the name. If you
okay.
had a docket number, so you could look up the person's name
Yeah.
A lot of page number and then get the
Yeah.
document
And if we had that log on there, they could go to that first and find it, and then they could go. And you would just pull up like a one-page thing or whatever, but just one extra step, but it gets you where you want to be faster.
Make it happen.
I can't hear anything.
Make it happen.
Oh, okay. Got it. Sorry.
Anything else? So you're gonna check into that, Angelica? Yeah. And it's a start.
Are there any, can I ask you a question? Just maybe we don't know the answer, but it's something we could probably, besides what, it feels like we're very reactive to some of the regulations that are happening, which is fine. That's fine. Is there any, should we be a little more proactive about certain issues too? Like, for example, seems to be a lot of interest in apartment buildings. I don't know if that's really happening here in Readfield, but you know, certainly in Maine and in the Northeast, there's a lot of discussion about, you know, affordable housing or consolidated housing. Obviously, we're dealing with that in different ways, but things like data centers, large warehousing, and that sort of stuff. I mean, I seriously doubt this is a Readfield, but I'm just throwing out some words that are and things we're seeing in other places. I was just wondering if there was a reason for this board to maybe be a little more thoughtful about some of that, to help guide us maybe in the next few years with some of the land use thought process, so we can get ahead of it, unlike the solar ordinance where we're basically scrambling at the last minute to get it done.
Well, I mean, the housing stuff is a big part of what's been coming down the pipe legislatively. And it's dealt with, you know, multi-unit housing, and it's really not given municipalities much opportunity to get out ahead of it because it's been very, very directive, as you know.
Right.
And so there's not much opportunity there. You know, other things, I mean, if you're aware of other issues, I mean, data centers, right, it probably isn't going to be, you know, if there was, it would be a big deal. There are things that you think that we should be looking into, we can certainly do that. I think a lot of the legislative effort has been focused on housing recently.
I like the way you're thinking, and that's definitely a planning function. And as a board, we are very reactive. We work with the state, when they mandate something, we have to answer it and everything. But I like what you're thinking, and again, that would be incorporating a little change here that we dedicate some time to doing planning. I brought up at the last meeting that we have one contractor that's redoing the meeting house. He's doing a phenomenal job, and what he's doing is he's taking a historic building that's had 5 uses, and he's turning it into, you know, apartments. Much like the Cornerstone Cafe, they turn that into apartments. How do we incentivize, how do we make it easier for people to do things like that? I'm not just talking regulations, but thinking, you know, out of the box that, you know, we're open to doing these things, and how do we get it out there? How do we incentivize, you know, builders and things, because they're not going to do it for free.
I mean, I always thought of a radical idea, give them 2 years of property taxes for free. You build a house in Readfield.
And that's the kind of
Your taxes
thinking we
for
have
2
to come
years.
up with, yeah. And
Because
then,
they qualify your mortgage based upon your
Yep.
payment, and if it doesn't include taxes, then you can afford the house.
but again, that's a planning function.
Yeah.
And that would, you know, that would encapsulate having certain times or certain meetings where we sit around and throw things around, like you just mentioned. And, you know, what can we do to get that?
One of the things that came up on the comp committee when we were doing that, seems like a forever ago, but it was another one, was more about the, you know, trying to revitalize parts of the Main Street, you know, that main part of Readfield, and trying to get, you know, Kent's Hill to support some of that and, you know, to their advantage. It's, you know.
You know, I would suggest a place, you know, a place to look, and we need to be looking anyway at some point and take another look at it, is the comp plan. I mean, it was just passed, and there are elements of that deal with, you know, with development in town, downtown development, for
Right.
instance. I mean,
Exactly.
and there are segments of it that deal with all of these things, you know, historic significance. I mean, it's in there, and it lays out the plan, and there are responsibilities that the planning board has, you know, for implementation of the comp plan. And, you know, I would suggest that's where we need to be.
Yeah, we should
talking about that
revisit
stuff.
that.
Yeah, yeah.
Portland passed an ordinance where they fine commercial property owners for having vacant properties, which I just thought was crazy.
Oh, I read that.
Yeah, like, oh,
Yeah.
you can't get a tenant, I'm gonna fine you.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's the other radical way, but I mean, what do you do about Main Street and Readfield? Apparently, nothing's gonna happen with those properties, so what could we do?
Well, it's a worthy question. I mean, I think there are some things we can do, but some of those ideas are what you said, and some of them are more infrastructure based. You know, there's a lack of certain infrastructure. You know, there's no waste disposal system really for like a proper restaurant or something like that. So those are kinds of things the town should look at and see if the town wants to play a role.
Yeah, you know, revitalization would be a nice thing.
So therefore, you're incentivizing certain businesses. And we did do that. There was a little push for that. What was it?
I mean, otherwise,
10, 15 years ago.
those buildings are just gonna collapse.
And that stuff, you know, again, it's all addressed in the comp plan,
Yeah.
a lot of it.
I'm not advocating for turning it into, you know, Main Street Hollow or something like that, but I think that we did do a lot of that work, and I just brought it up because I think it's something since we're talking about administrative things and what we can do as a board, I think it's important that we at least. And then you're going to say, great, Henry, well, you should take a look at that.
I would think that Main Street would be a priority for us in the town, because it really does affect everything. Without being heavy-handed, you know, trying to figure out a way, like you said, create incentives to beautify it. Otherwise, if something doesn't happen with those buildings, they collapse.
Yeah.
And then it looks like Lisbon Street, like downtown Readfield.
Create incentive.
Well, I would suggest that, you know, we start dedicating some time to the comp plan, and specifically those things that the planning board has been assigned in the comp plan. And we haven't had time to spend on it really of late, but I think it's important too, and I do think that's the right place to start, because it's in there, a lot of it's in there. Now, stuff about downtown and Main Street, and there's a lot about redevelopment in there.
Maybe we should just put it as an item
Yeah.
for several meetings, just for little short bursts, because it might be a bit too much to, you know, maybe give ourselves a time limit on it or something each time,
Yeah.
just to we're at least touching on it. And then
You know, we can,
just
you
move
know,
the
we
needle a little
can
bit.
start perhaps by revisiting it generally, you know.
Yeah.
What's in here, you know, how is the planning board implicated in this document? What do we want to take on?
Thanks.
Anything else? No? Okay. Adjourn.
The bylaws? Bylaws?
Oh,
I mean, the minutes.
Minutes, I'm sorry. I forgot all about
The
that.
minutes.
We're not adjourned. We have minutes.
I have 30 seconds of comments on the minutes. I'm sorry, Angelica.
That's okay,
Uh,
Starts now.
Yeah, first bullet point, second line, I think that should just say, in light of what the board will will revisit the draft after Paula presents a revised version, which is what happened. But that's what she said she'd do, so I think it's okay. And take out what's there, just say when Paula presents, after Paula presents a revised version. And the only other thing, second bullet point, first line, we're at the end of that line, guarantee in the solar ordinance, I think so, to the solar ordinance, I think.
And I had one comment on the third bullet, and that is, in the middle it says, spoken with the town manager about hiring a consultant. I would say hiring a consultant with state grant funds to incorporate provisions of the legislation. And the LDs that are, we have LD 1829 in parentheses. I put the other two as well, and those are 427 and 997. Other comments? Anybody? Is there a motion?
Motion to approve the minutes as amended.
Second.
Motion and a second discussion. All those in favor? John?
Oh, I don't think I was there.
Oh, okay.
I wasn't there either.
All right, so abstentions? John, are you abstaining?
Yep,
Okay.
abstaining.
All right,
Whatever.
thanks. Now we're adjourned. Camera's freaking out.